little bit about how some of these photographs are originally and the steps that I take to restore them. In this case, I always try to size to 8 by 10 because that in the United States is a common standard size, and it's also good for anybody anywhere. And 8 by 10 at 400 dpi allows me to downsize or upsize and not lose anything. So that's where I like to start on a lot of these images. And this is the original scan from the negative. Here at the top you can see where it was broken. There's a lot of damage here, some damage here, a little here, down here. And so because I am wanting to restore this to 8 by 10, there's some things I have to do in order to do that. When I first started this, it was not sized to 8 by 10. As large as it is, it was 8 by 10 down to this dimension, so I made it bigger. The first thing I did was I used Adobe's generative fill in order to correct this area up here. And you say, well, there's a lot of stuff still there. That's fine. We'll take care of that later. And with generative fill, they actually give you a few different, they give you 3 options. I chose this option because it was the cleanest. And so then I did generative fill up on this corner as well. And again, the same premise. They give you 3 different options. This is kind of wonky here, and that's kind of wonky too. So this was the best one of the 3. And then I did a little bit more down here in this area here. You can see I tried to improve that. And of the 3 options, that one was the best for me. And again, over here, I wanted to do the same thing. So then when I was done with that, I made what they call a stamp visible. And what it does is it creates a layer that combines everything that it sees. And the reason I do that is because some functions that I do cannot be done except on a stamped visible layer. And in this case, what I wanted to do was to remove all the scratches. And Photoshop has a really good restoration filter that will clean up lots of stuff kind of instantly, and that allows you to get that out of the way quickest. Okay, so I'm going to show you. This is without. This is without, and you'll notice it's not, you might not see a huge difference, but what will happen is some areas are affected by this, and you don't want it to be affected by this. So I went in and masked it so that only what I want cleaned up was cleaned up. The hair is still good, the pin's still good, because this messes with the pin, for example, and if you see the hair, the mustache, it doesn't do well for that. So I just went in, used a mask. So if you see here's the picture, this is the picture, this is the mask. And so everything that I did on there, I used the mask to keep what I wanted, that's the black, and remove what I didn't want. Those were all the scratches, that's the white. Sorry about that. It's telling me I need to calibrate my monitors. So then I created a new stamped visible layer. And I really kind of didn't have to. I did in this case, and I really didn't have to, because what I did next was I wanted to, if you see this white area, I wanted to fill that in. And so I used Adobe's generative fill, and I added to that. That is one generative fill. You do not have to have the stamped visible layer. So I really didn't need to do that, so it was kind of my fault. And then I created another layer, stamp visible layer here, and that was mostly to do final cleanup because there were still some areas where, for example right here, I had some spots I didn't see before. So I'll do a final cleanup and I'll use a stamp visible layer, and I have to use a stamp visible layer because the remove tool does not work on a blank layer. So I had to make a stamp visible layer. Then I made a levels adjustment. I adjusted everything, went in, and if you notice here, this was kind of blown out, so I went in and I used a brightness and contrast layer and filled that in a little bit better, and then lightened it up overall. The last thing I did was Adobe has a really good restoration filter, and so it enhanced the picture itself and the face a little bit as well. And so that's what I did to get to this final result. My stomach's growling. I hope you don't hear that. And so this is the before, and you can see all the damage, and this is the after. So when I post these pictures, sometimes I'll post the original, a lot of times I don't, but most times there is work to be done, whether it's a little bit or a lot, that's the difference. But most times there's work to be done because when I scan these, it's not coming in at the perfect contrast, brightness, contrast, tonal values. It's not coming in that way, so I have to make adjustments even on the best images, which I just finished one. There was a wedding photo. It was like a really good image. There were still things that had to be done. So when I post, it's not, there's work that goes into it beforehand. So just want to let you know that. And the last thing I'll do is I have a preset hues and saturation, and that's one I'm going to be working on. And I'll come in and I'll bring in a sepia tone, which is just another layer. Turn it off, turn it on, there it is. And then I add my watermark. And people ask, so why do you watermark? Why do you watermark? Well, the reason I watermark, two things. One, in most cases, I spend a lot of money on these negatives. For example, that wedding photo, it was more than a little bit, okay? So that's part of it, but also it protects my work, and it protects somewhat from people stealing your work. Now it doesn't, they can remove watermarks, but that is the reason why I add a watermark. And where possible, I always talk about the photographer in the comments. So I'm not putting the photographer's watermark on here. This is my watermark. This is to protect my intellectual property, if you will. So I hope that helps, and I hope you enjoyed this.